So it's one of those cushion that the knee it's called the meniscus, basically it absorbs sort of all the energy once you start, walking in the knee joint. So relatively small surgery. And then I remember after the surgery, the day after I went back to work, I remember being back and then sort of limping a little bit just because I just had surgery the day prior. And then everybody was kind of joking around saying that, oh my God, that surgery, it's so simple. Like for sure, you have to come back to work. You don't have any pain right now. Even though they're saying kind of jokingly, I still felt the pressure to, basically keep doing what I do and then not taking any time off. But what ended up happening was that I think I went back to the activities too quickly, and then I ended up having what's called the synovial fistula. So what that is, it's really rare. It's actually really, really rare, but it happened to me. So what ended up happening is that those arthroscopy portal did not close properly. And so my wound was still leaking about 1 week or 1 week and a half after the surgery, which is very unusual. And then on top of it, what ended up happening is that I had a superficial infection of the skin, which is called the cellulitis. To put things in context, it's actually a very scary thing just because if the infection were to propagate through the opening into the knee joint, I would have what's called the septic arthritis of the knee, and which is can be quite catastrophic, especially in a young person, because what that does is the bacteria can actually eat up the cartilage in a very fast time frame, and then I will basically have a very arthritic knee in a very young age. Luckily, I did not have that. But what ended up happening is that I was on call that weekend. So I remember the schedule was done already a month ago. So, and then on top of it, I wasn't expected to have this kind of complications 1 week and a half, 2 weeks after the surgery. So at that time, I was trying to see if there are other residents or anybody else who can sort of do the call for me. But then at the time, we were very short on staff. So I ended up having to do my own shift, but with basically an IV pole because, I do have to get antibiotics and then that's has to be given IV. So I end up having to go to the emerge, have the emergency doctor install the IV line, hook it on a pole. And with that, I sort of treat the patients with any sort of fracture. I have to reduce it. And then in the morning, I had to go in to check on the patients. And then all the family members of the patient were like, oh, are you the patient or are you the doctor? Well, like, no, I guess I'm both.
Did anybody believe you?
Well, I have my, I was in scrubs and then I have my ID with me. So it didn't, so that was, I guess, sort of convincing. But I remember distinctively that I had to go to the operating room with that IV line. So because it's all sterile, we even have to make sure that everything is sterile up until the elbow. At the end of the surgery, which was like 3:00 in the morning, my IV line was busted, but I still have to get another dose of IV because I had missed it during the surgery. So I ended up having to call my friend. I remember having to call him in the middle of the night because at that time the nurse couldn't put the IV in. He had to come in, do an IV line. I think we still have a picture of that at 3:00 in the morning in the hospital, and then to have the antibiotics. It was kind of a surreal experience to be.
Well, you were a doctor and patient at the same time.
Yeah, absolutely. I just think and then I have so many other examples, not just me, but also other colleagues who almost went over and beyond sort of physical capacities to say, oh, I'm a doctor, so I know what's going on in my body. I don't need rest, therefore I should keep going. Which is a very insane thing to even think about it right now.
Yeah, that is such an unbelievable story that first of all, the medical system would even permit that kind of situation to exist. That not only were they not sending the doctors home with rest and not to return back to work immediately, but also that there was joking, that there was some kind of a subtle implication that you should return, even though you just had a surgery. Mm-hmm. And then subsequently you develop these complications. You said that they were actually quite rare, but those complications might not have happened if you had taken the rest that you were supposed to take.
Probably. I mean, we don't know, right? So
we don't know for sure. Yeah, but really, just the image of you walking around in your scrubs, attached to an IV pole, seeing your patients, and then going into the operating room, operating on another patient while you yourself were receiving an IV it's really surreal.
Yeah. Well, just to bring a slight precision, I to go to for sure, in the operating room, there was no IV pole at all. I just had to maintain the IV access. So,
okay.
We have to unplug it. Put everything sterile, but you end up busting it out anyway. So the whole thing was a mess.
I hope that those situations are a thing of the past for you and for anybody else.
Yeah, definitely would hope so.
What would you say now, today, as Ang today, to that Ang some years ago who was really struggling with the training, was struggling with burnout and feeling like you had to keep it up even though you were getting quite tired and sick yourself?
That's actually a very good question. I think if I were to go back in time or even have the sort of the ability, I would tell, I think, two things to my past self. I think the first one is it's just to be kinder, to be nice to your own self. I think that's, I guess, one of the lessons that I've learned throughout the year. It's that I wasn't really kind to myself, and maybe that's another reason why I push myself so hard, because I felt that I need to prove something to other people, or this need to please to other people. It's very strong. It's almost like a driving force in my own identity to be accepted, to be validated by others. I think that sort of this need to please, to sort of to have other people saying, especially people in authority, be like, "Oh, Ang, I think you worked really hard and you are a good resident." I think those are some of the words that I was looking for, and then unfortunately, I think I did that despite sort of my own inner being, whether it's physical or mental health. So I think looking back right now, I would just tell myself to be kinder to myself instead of always trying to please others. I think that's one thing. And then the second thing, it kind of always ties back to the first point. It's also to learn to be more of my own advocate. I think we just had a brunch with my old colleague in Toronto yesterday, and then she really pointed out something that's quite obvious, and then I have never sort of realized. It's that she said that right now I don't have a job, I'm looking for a job, and yet all my colleagues seem to already find something that's quite good. And then for me right now, I'm sort of in this tricky situation to be like, well, I did so many years of training and yet I don't have a jobs available. And what she said was that I am someone who works really hard, but often forgets to be my own advocate, to put myself out there in a way. And then I think one of the biggest reason why it's that I often misunderstand the difference between being respectful and being obedient. So I think that's actually very true. I think throughout my residency, once again, I almost had this pervasive need to be like, and then I also want to be respectful because that's what my culture says. That's how I was brought up. So I always want to be respectful to people, especially to authority. But I think I overdo it, or in the sense that my action were sort of misinterpreted in a more sort of in a Western society, when actually, especially in surgery, people with sort of a leadership skills are actually more applauded, are actually rewarded. So me being more sort of respectful towards other, and especially towards the authority, sometimes can make it seem that I'm a more like an obedient person, and then that's not a really good trait to have, especially in a surgical field. Because in surgical field, we want you to lead an OR. We want you sort of to be in the OR and then be the leader, because you're the one cutting the patient, knowing when the surgery is going to end. The anesthesiologists, the nurses, they not that they all count on you, but they want to know how long the surgery is going to last, when are we going to do the next surgery. So there it's a lot of responsibility. And if you don't take that physical space, and if you don't take that responsibility, then being obedient, it's not going to make the surgery go faster or go any smooth. So I think that's what I will tell myself. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point that you make. This very fine line between showing someone that you're respecting them by doing your job the way that they expect you to, but also not as if you weren't thinking yourself.
Yeah.
You know, I think sometimes and I've run into this myself as well in my life, is that for the longest time, I didn't know how to interact with people who were older than me. Mm-hmm. Because when I was growing up, I was always taught you have to always listen and respect your elders. And for, I would say, like the first, 5 years or so after I left home for university, I didn't know how to have conversations with people who were older than me, like, maybe around 10 years older than me, because I saw them as my elders. Mm-hmm. And I didn't feel like I was on even ground with them.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think it maybe comes from a similar place of wanting to show that I've always been told that you're more knowledgeable, more experienced in the world. And if I were to be too much myself, I guess, mm-hmm. to be too opinionated, to show that I had my own ideas, it would be not showing that I respected how they came to be in their life and why they had their own ideas. So I wonder, for you right now in this very moment of your life, what is the difference between respect and obedience?
I think right now I'm still struggling to understand sort of the difference. I don't think I have figured out the answer quite yet, but what I can say is that I'm giving myself more of a voice in the OR. What that means is that when I do think that my opinions are valid, I'll make it a point to push it further, which what that means is that, give you an example. When I do the OR, before the slightest moment that I have sort of a hesitations, I tend to sort of hesitate and then sort of look around, and then the staff would take the thing away because they find me to be too slow or they find me to be undecisive. But right now, even if those things were to occur, I wouldn't give the instrument away, in the sense that I would tell the staff. And now I think I'm also having more confidence and having in a position more of an authority to be, I know I'm struggling, but that's what I'm here to do. Give me 5 minutes. Now I think I have more understanding of my own abilities to actually say those things out loud, to be, I know I'm struggling, but please do give me 5 minutes. And if in 5 minutes I still couldn't get it, and then what I'm doing, it's not really dangerous. I'm just trying to perform a basic, say, shoulder arthroscopy. So sometimes I will say that. For me, that's concrete actions where I tell other people where things are and where I'm at, and then it's showing them also